This is IBM Museum. Little bit of a ad lib video here. I'm still working on my SCSI level project. And for that purpose, I went through and I've got my KVM switch, and that means keyboard video mouse. That's an easy way to switch between systems for when I do that video capture. And I encountered a particular issue when I was starting to connect that, even though I've had that unit going a couple months ago, and I thought it was a good way to answer a question that I see come up rather frequently on the VGA ports of the IBM PS2s, since that's the systems that started that VGA standard. We do see some of the vintage community go through and they have a newer cable, or they have a cable, they try and plug it into a PS2, the video port, and they can't get that cable connected. And they say, hey, I've got an extra pin on my cable and it doesn't go in. That's blocked out on the VGA port of the PS2. What do I do? How do I get around this issue? And so I'm going to go over to previously done video for that segment, and then I'll be back with the topic that I'm doing here. I'm doing a different topic. I saw a question come up on the CIF news group, and that's comp.sys.ibm.ps2.hardware, and it was talking about memory adapters of the Model 70. So I want to go over those as well. But let's go to the short little video segment I had on the VGA port, and then we'll return back to our memory boards here. So here is the VGA connection of a Model 55SX that is tucked away off in the corner on the back of the I/O port area of the system, and a little bit more of a challenge to get a light on it to get my camera to focus up, but you can clearly see that one spot being blocked out from any pin being inserted. So if you have a newer VGA cable with all 15 pins, it will not seat in this connector. I will show my solution to this and actually set up a spare planar in a vise. It's just a way of getting on camera, although that's not required for my solution. I could go through and actually get this that plug easily removed in this situation as well. So I'll be right back once I get that rig set up, and we'll have a look at how I do it. Okay, here I have a spare planar set up in the vise. Had to kind of adjust some camera angles, but this is what I do. I've got just a little hand drill that, you know, the bit's pretty small, and we just go. You can even see the bit flexes a little bit as we go through and do that. But that gives it enough of a hole. And as I say, people go through and also just use a hot pin as a way of breaking through that. And some people go through from the cable end, and on their cables with the 15 pins, they go through and pull that pin. To me, this is a little bit less destructive, and with a VGA connection plugged in, you don't even notice it at all. So that's the method I use, and to get a solution for this issue. So let's go back to our regular scheduled recording that I wanted to do. I just had this question come up. I see this occur just about once every month where someone goes through online and asks that question and says, hey, I can't connect in this cable. What do I do? So I thought I'd go over that on video.
And now on to the main topic of the video of these memory adapters. And these were very common from IBM for the PS2 Model 70 and could be placed on the Model 80 as well. We did see some of the Model 80 adapter before having those little daughter cards. But this is the memory adapters that IBM called the 2 to 14 megabyte memory expansion adapters. And I'm going through, I'm going to show from the earliest boards. There were some limitations and some ECAs that those engineering change announcements that IBM released talking about some of the limitations of the board or some of the things that they had to fix or replace one board with another as they went through a little bit on the life cycle changes on this adapter. And of course, all these are from IBM. They're not from later, third-party adaptations from the Kingston and other manufacturers. CU-RAM were often got through a little bit more of those problems and typically had a higher capacity that their boards are capable of. But these are the initial memory adapters that came with those units. And I'm just going to cover the ins and outs of those adapters and lead up to the adapter that the question was about on the news group and show it. And it was the later adapter that had a lot less of those limitations or truly worked like it was supposed to. So I'm going to get off the screen here, get turned around, and I'll go over these adapters one by one. And I'm trying to simulate basically a daylight conditions here with where the lighting is a little bit better. That's why I do my macro photography of the cards. Just with the nighttime lights I have to have on, I can't, I get glare or where these aren't lit up enough. So I'm just having to direct for the time frame that I'm doing the video, but I think I'll be fine here. Now, what I've got up on the bed right now, and I'm going to do it in this format where I'm going to show both sides of the adapter, because on one version there is modifications on the back of the adapter as well, just to get recognizing some of the things that to the adapter, the things to look for as IBM went through. And this information is documented pretty well, but there is some parts left out, and maybe we'll get actually a little bit more of the in the commentary and follow-up videos and get that documentation in some way improved a little bit more, a little bit more descriptive than what I saw today, looking things over. So, as I said, this is a 2 through 14 megabyte adapter. And this is the initial version that IBM came out with. And some of the things that are kind of evident is just, you want to look at the components here. Some of these spaces on the printed circuit board or PCB are vacant. There's not really some components mainly down in this one area. There's also not components between the SIM socket connectors. And in this instance, it looks like one of the first modifications, or I don't know if this was planned, but IBM did have these resistors over some of the pins of the chips. And I've seen one version where they didn't have that, still had some of the markings, but you will see these resistors as well as part of the modifications. And in particular, we want to look just above this chip here. There's a capacitor that is there in the center, but there's not really any bodge wires or any adaptation. We, just to focus in a little bit on that clearly, and also down in this area, we don't see any bodge wires on the front or back of this adapter. Now, this adapter, despite being called the 2-14 Mb, and the thought was that you had at least, for the minimum capacity, you'd have a single 2 MB module in there. And for the maximum capacity, you would have 3 of the 4 MB modules, and then 1 2 MB module to make that, to comprise up that 14 MB of RAM. So one of these sockets would have only a 2 MB board in there. It could not have the 4 MB board. And also the SIMs that were recognized by this adapter are the 85 nanosecond and then the 80 nanosecond. And that would be common for the 2 MB SIMs were from IBM. I mean, they had those 85 nanosecond modules for the Model 70 as planar memory. And then you had, some of those modules were produced as 80 nanosecond. And of course, you didn't want the older, I believe it was a 100 nanosecond module of the 2 MB capacity. And that was typically for the Model 50Z as planar memory. It had a single SIM slot, and you could have that 2 MB module in there of that slower 100 nanosecond speed, because that was just a 286 CPU on those. But and that 286 ran at 10 megahertz, so it was slower in speed. So the 4 MB modules were, I think I've saw the slowest I've seen them is at a 80 nanosecond speed, and then they had later on ones they had as 70 nanosecond, and that was for like your Model 90s and things like that. I think a little bit of the low end Model 95s did the 4 MB 70 nanosecond, and the presence detect, those little bridge pieces in there would be in the wrong position to be able to recognize that SIM as an 80 nanosecond. So if you had like some of those newer modules, you'd have to go through and adjust those to work on this adapter. And so one of the things, despite IBM calling this the 2-14 Mb adapter, was that these have a label on the back, and it's on both boards. I've only got one board of this variety. I just have to see how that label really shows up on my. See if my webcam can focus in enough on that. But I'll go through and read that. It says do not use 4 MB SIMs on this adapter, and it's got a 49F5507 is what it looks like. So this adapter apparently, without any modifications otherwise on the adapter, would be just for the 2 MB SIM. So this would be a maximum capacity of 8 MB in that regard. You couldn't use the 4 MB SIMs. So there was a replacement for that adapter, or a modification. That's a little bit dusty. Get it within my marked out area. And so in this case, there was a slight modification here of, there's a little loop above this chip, a bodge wire that just loops back from one pin to another on this chip for some reason, some engineering change that that IBM specified. Otherwise, it's all the same adapter, front and back. And then it still has, well, that one doesn't. That's one of my adapters that, well, and that one doesn't either. It makes a liar out of me that finally just has the label of the enhanced 80386 memory expansion. So it looks like that version, I was under the impression that that was not upgraded to be able to use the 4 megabyte SIMs, but I guess it was just that initial version. So it looks like that one patch of that chip makes it to where it's able to use the 4 megabyte SIM. So it's just something to pay attention to. I mean, it's a label on there on most of the adapters that are affected, but that, you know, and I don't think that using the 4 megabyte SIMs really damages the card, but it's just the board is not able to use them. And we might go through and empirically test that in some other later video just to kind of see how the adapter, or if it throws up an error. And I don't know how that really slipped through on any quality assurance program to introduce an adapter as being able to do 14 up to 14 megabyte of capacity when it wasn't. But this is, and I have quite a few of these, this version as well. And this is not, I've not seen where this is marked as, you know, it seems to be able to use the 4 megabyte SIMs. I don't even see that label a lot of the time on the back here at all. There's not a label on the tab at all. But it's got that extensive bodge wire rework in this area here of the adapter. And that loop that was on earlier doesn't appear here. And there still is not any components between the SIM sockets or anything like that, and still are the resistor bridging over the chip. And I think I have one of these adapters that doesn't have these resistor bridges, but pretty common in this case where a lot of my adapters have all this bodge wire work in here. And then there's what appears to be the last version of that particular variation. I got the cards. Nestling the cards like that is really nice sometimes, but they can get locked together in some cases. It's an easy way to store those sometimes without damaging the components or anything like that. So in this case, and this bodge wire work here is really all the same to the older adapter, even though this one has a different colored wire in that one section. And then it's just what wiring that IBM used. I mean, there it's got all yellow wires. And but it's the same pin, to the same pins as that earlier. It's just that they have another bodge wire on the back of this. And again, this adapter appears to be able to use the both the 2 megabyte modules and the 4 megabyte modules. There's not any limitations on it. Just on that first version that didn't have any bodge wire modifications on the adapter. And even IBM, rather than going through and just soldering that little loop wire on there. They just stuck a label on them saying, hey, that couldn't use the 4 megabyte modules. And there's a lot of different FRUs for these adapters, and I can probably go through and list those like in the comments and list them from how they appear in the documentation, just to be a little bit more complete. And I didn't really see a whole bunch of FRU markings that I could locate that were really particular. I was more trying to visually separate them as well, just to give a little bit of highlights for if there were any limitations or what particular levels of this board had for EC changes. Now, with this adapter, okay. Let me take a timeout here. Okay, I stacked my cards wrong. I stacked the ones that I was completed talking on to these two. And again, the front and back arrangement. And these ones I've really seen where it does have that tab label and seems to mark those out a little bit better. No label on the back bracket, but on the tabs it identifies that at least a little bit better. And that's not 100% guarantee. You know, if you see a label, it means a particular level of board. But this is viewed as the last kind of iteration of that adapter. And it's got a lot more components. In particular, it's got this chip down here for the EEPROM, and treated as that being improving the abilities of the adapter with that code that helps run this adapter a little bit better than the earlier versions. And as you can see here, I mean, there's not any bodge wires on these adapters. This was apparently went through a little bit more of a quality assurance program to where they were sure of the PCB layout, that it didn't have any issues. And there are components between the SIM sockets here. Now, this is still the 2-14 megabyte adapter. And of this, even though this one SIM slot is separate, I've heard about, and I mean, I can maybe get a little bit more updates in the comments or kind of follow up with this video. I've heard of one case where one of these, where this SIM socket is white instead of black. It has the 3 black SIM sockets, but then has the this single one here as white, just to show it a part of the other SIM sockets. And none of my adapters have a white socket. They're all like this, where they have, for this version of the adapter, of a memory adapter from IBM, they all have the black SIM sockets. And I'm also noticing, because we have to delineate which is a socket that can only have a 2 megabyte module in it. And the documentation on these boards is incomplete. It doesn't really seem to mention that, of what SIM socket, or, you know, is it just where it's probably not the instance where you can just mix and match. You would have to have that 2 megabyte module in one particular SIM socket if you have 4 megabyte modules in the other 3 SIM sockets. And I did notice on this adapter, that it does have an asterisk down here by this SIM socket. And I think that that marks that one, or that is going to be the one that's going to be treated differently. And so I'll probably do a little bit of a follow-up video and where we can empirically test that to make sure that that is the module for the socket for the 2 megabyte module, and all the other 3 are filled with those 4 megabyte modules. And I'll have SIMs I'll put in there and go through and actually install this on Model 70, go a little bit further. I'm not really set up right now to do that, but I should be able to do that quickly enough in my video schedule, although there is many topics that I'm preparing for, and that's the thought, is there's just so much content that can be covered this way to be of help. But that's all I have for the adapters at this point. I was just trying to go through and answer the question, and it was even the question on the news group is, can I go through, and the person was asking for someone if they had the correct 4 megabyte modules that would work on the adapter, but they were saying, hey, can I put all 4 megabyte modules on this adapter? And my answer was that no, that this is a 2 through 14 megabyte adapter. For some reason, IBM had that limitation to where it would only go, that last SIM socket was only able to have a 2 megabyte module. So you could not populate all these with the 4 megabyte modules. So that's all I have for the adapters. But I'm also going to talk about something that probably a lot of people noticed with this video. So let me get back on screen. Okay, what people may have noticed at the start of the video and had the question about, just seeing what I'm wearing here, the cap and the t-shirt, and there's varieties of the style and everything else of this. And this is actually official IBM merchandise. I mean, I wish that I could be, in that to where I could say, hey, this is merchandise, or this is a little bit more personalized with my logo. And of course, I'm not affiliated with IBM, and I don't want to cross any lines that they have gone through for artwork that is it's effectively copyrighted. Not to go through and infringe on any of that, but in my logo, I mean, that's would be nice at a later point for me to have merchandise that goes through and, has that as well. And that may be possible. And even despite this being, or maybe a factor of it being official IBM merchandise, I've noticed that this is the shirts and the t-shirts in this case. I think they had a polo as well, and the caps are very economical. They're not expensive at all. The t-shirts actually are below $20 United States dollars, or USD, and the caps were below $20 as well. Not all that much, but really the notion out there of a lot of merchandise is that you really can't find a $20 t-shirt anymore. I mean, they're typically in some of the times when they have the logo and particular merchandise, and I realize a lot of that can go to the creator or be a little bit more income for them in funding that merchandise in small quantities being produced. But I'll give links in the video description to the location that sells these shirts and caps, because I think it's nice. I'm sure there's a lot of people that would love to pick up this merchandise and wear it for representing the hobby that they're in. So I'll give a link to that. But if you do like this video and like the you know the content that I've presented here, as well as the other content that I've featured before and am going to feature in the future, click on that like button and do subscribe to my channel, please. I can hopefully get those subscriptions up and get a little bit more to where I can look at those avenues of game merchandise and for people to wear, but just a little bit more of the getting a reputation for the channel of me providing good information, going through and trying to help out people to be able to work with their systems, just like the question on the news group is. And I'm also going to go through and I'm going to give links to the news group, just a common way to view that. And normally that's Google is the one that hosts the news group. It used to be Deja News back in the day, but Google has the basically they host those news groups now that have been operational for the last 20, 30 years. And then I'll also give links to the Facebook group covering PS2s, and just a good way in common social media also to find those people. I'm a participant on those groups, and it's a good place to ask questions and things like that. If you do have comments about the video, leave them below. I will have a follow-up video for this later on as we go through, and we can probably even experiment with some of the earlier adapters, but primarily getting those adapters pictured as a getting one of those, install them all 70 like Alexander has the question, and determine which of those SIM sockets is just for that 2 megabyte module. But that is all I have for now. This is IBM Museum. Thank you.